Your background in real estate investing is real interesting because your marketing style, what you're doing in marketing, nobody else is doing out there. Nobody else in this industry is doing out there. So that's something that's pretty huge. But before we dive into that, give us your background. What got you into real estate investing? We know you're in Mexico, and that's something different, right? You're literally virtual investing from another country, something nobody else I've interviewed does. But tell us, where did you start? When did you start? And we'll take it from there.
Yeah, man. So I've been in the game, Paul, 15 years. I'm getting to be a seasoned guy, one of those guys. I got my start because I actually went and got a master's degree in theology. So a lot of people were like, that's really strange. How did you go from, seminary to real estate? But, I had one of those moments where kind of a seed was dropped that really changed the trajectory of my life. And I was eating a chicken biscuit at Chick-fil-A and just thinking and looking up on the mural at how Kathy Truitt had built Chick-fil-A and was utilizing those freedom of resources to impact the world, whether that was, by providing funds for colleges, different things like that. And Paul, that was the first time where I felt kind of this, direction change for me to what would it be like to, rather than go into vocational kind of church world, to utilize my business for freedom of time, freedom of resources, so I could impact the world the way that I wanted to, but more importantly, write the check myself,
right.
Not have to run around and raise money and kind of be at the mercy of other people. So the only two things I knew that people had, decent vehicles is the way I understood it. I had no business understanding at age 25. It was real estate, or I could go and invest in the stock market. And that was pretty easy because I'm not that strong in math. So I was like, I'll go to real estate. And so the way I got in the game very initially was I just got licensed to be a real estate agent. And I went to work for Century 21, calling expireds and FSBOs.
Oh, nice. Back in those days.
This is before we had the technology that would do it for you, where you had to pull the list, go into white paper. Oh my gosh.
Remember that well.
The prep before I started my calls, at 8:30, 8:45 while people were still home on their rotary phones. So I got started, man.
I could totally relate to that because, I got my license too. And I was already investing, but I was doing the same, was kind of doing listings and investing and trying to do listings for other investors that are out there. So I totally understand where you're going from there. Century 21, it's interesting. That's pretty good start. Now, the theological background, that's awesome. That's great because there's so much you can do in a real estate world with the amount of wealth you can create and what you can do, the good you can do. I mean, it's awesome. It's big time stuff. So that's pretty, I've never interviewed somebody with a theological degree either, especially a master's. That's good stuff. So you got into it 15 years ago. You and I are pretty much veterans there. I got in around 19 years ago as well. Now, what you do that's totally different than anybody else is you advertise on the radio. That's your number one method, right?
Yeah, I like to call it the marketing channel that everyone knows about, but nobody's using. Everybody knows about radio, but I like to kind of lob this question out there. And this is usually what people go, that's interesting. Who in your market do you know right now that's utilizing radio to generate investment opportunities? Right. And you'll step back and you'll go, well, I might hear somebody come into town for a couple of weeks, like a fortune builder or something like that, to fill some seats. But I can't think of anyone in my market that's utilizing radio because there's virtually no competition on it, Paul.
Right. That's for sure. I mean, the only one I've ever heard besides fortune builders is Ron LeGrand. And he's been doing it since the late 80s, early 90s. But yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty interesting. And it's probably less expensive than the direct mail, or at least on a similar frame, right? But you're branding yourself on radio. You're making yourself more, everybody sends out those little postcards, right? But not everybody is advertising out there on radio. So people, when they hear you on radio or on television, think you're big time, right? They think you're a big time, legit outfit. So I kind of think it changes perception for people, for the sellers, that is.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said a few things there I want to unpack. There's a lot there, actually. So there are two things that I find, Paul, that keep people away from radio, that they don't consider it. The first one is they say it's not affordable. If you ask most people, hey, what do you think it's going to cost you to start advertising on radio monthly? I usually hear somewhere around 10 grand. Mm-hmm. We help people set this up all over the country at this point. And the average monthly spend for our students is between $500 to $2,000 a month.
Totally affordable.
Total. And that's advertising 100 times on a station. Whew. We start 100 times. we stop at 100, and then we just go duplicate that on another station. So if you're doing the math on that real simply, that means on average, our 60-second spots on radio are between $5 to $20 on average, which is crazy to think that you can do that. And then the second assumption is people mistake themselves as their avatar or their demographic, right? They go, well, I stream music, so why would I advertise on radio? And here's this hugest misconception. If you look at closings all across the country, statistically, the people that are buying, giving us houses as sellers, right, that we're buying from are over the age of 50. I'm sorry, but our parents and grandparents do not have Spotify downloaded on their phone. They have two habits that they were raised with and continue to do. They watch television, and when they get in the car, they turn on the radio. And when you realize that your demographic is over the age of 50, those dots connect and go, wow, what an incredible way to get right in front of my audience in a way in which they receive messaging, which is the actual radio. And then you talked about, I like to call it celebrity status, right? So there's something that happens psychologically in our mind. This happens with television, it happens with radio, it happens with podcasts, and now even social media, right? As the internet has grown, we automatically elevate somebody in our mind. This is why we have celebrities. This is where movie stars come from. Right. So a problem with a lot of the other marketing channels out there is you can't build your brand off of them. If anything, you're hiding your brand. You don't put your company name on a bandit sign. You probably don't put your company name on the direct mail that you're sending out because you're spamming people. So the problem is you're not building authority in your area. You're not actually strengthening your brand. Radio actually creates celebrity status. And then here's the interesting thing that happens next, Paul. It creates instant credibility. Because here's what happens in the mind of the seller, particularly someone over the age of 50. Well, if Paul is advertising on the radio, he must be an expert because only people who advertise on the radio are experts. This is incredible, particularly for someone that's newer to the game. You might be going up against some other players in your area, the veterans, right? And you're like, how do I ever catch up to them because they built such authority? You can get it instantly via radio, which is incredible because consumers don't know that you haven't been in business for 15, 20 years. They just think that you have because you've been on radio. You must have been because new people don't advertise on the radio, which isn't true.
It's true. Yeah, no, it's super interesting. And the costs are way low. I mean, most people spend in direct mail marketing anywhere from $5 to $10,000 per month. And I'm thinking that you're probably going to get more legitimate leads or at least just as good, if not better leads off the radio than you're going to get on direct mail. Am I wrong?
100%. So I kind of view it as a spectrum, right? So I think direct mail is on, the quantity spectrum. You're going to get a lot of calls, but we know that over half of those calls are hate calls, right? Stop. And we all don't enjoy, whether you're taking those yourself, you're listening, you're like, I know what you're talking about, or you give them to your team and you're having to play counselor because your assistant caller calls you crying because they got cussed out 3 times. It's a difficult thing. And so the problem is it creates a large maintenance problem on the call volume side. Radio is on the other side. It's a lower, more manageable call volume, which is great, particularly if you're newer and don't have a lot of systems or taking these calls yourself. But it is, to this day, outside of a direct referral, the highest quality lead that we know how to generate. Because think about it. Someone, Paul, that's driving down the road that hears a call to action and picks up the phone to dial you, that's very different. They're very motivated because if they don't like you, they just turn the knob, right? They just listen to another station. So you don't get a bunch of tire kickers. And I can tell you, I've been doing radio now for 10 years. I have never gotten a hate call, but I still to this day get compliment texts or buddies call me. For some reason, people have this need, Paul, to go, man, I heard your ad on the radio. It's like even our friends. And that's that whole celebrity authority piece with radio. It's really interesting, that dynamic, even with people that know you.
Now, that is super interesting. And it makes just so much sense. All those hate calls that you get, typically it's when you're mailing lists, like probate lists, or estate sales where somebody has just passed away. So it's a real tough time. On a radio, you can advertise that, right? But now you're only hitting the people that are ready for it. They're ready to call you. Whereas the reason you're getting those hate ones, people are pissed off or really upset that a loved one just passed away. And then you're sending this thing trying to buy their house and they're thinking, this person's trying to rip me off. They get on the phone, they call you and they just tear into you, right? So now you're avoiding all of those, which are great. No investor likes to hear that, especially not a new investor. That can really rattle you. So that's huge.
And this is not a spray and pray approach. Again, this is not rocket science. The reality is that based on when you were born, area that you were born in, you are accustomed to a certain type of music, a genre. So again, 25-year-olds don't listen to the same station that their grandparents listen to.
Right.
So when you go on to a radio station and you pick something like classical music or old school country or old school rock, you are hitting primarily your target audience. So therefore, the calls that are coming in are the ones that you want. People that own homes, that have equity, and obviously have a circumstance that's requiring them to sell at a discount. So it's very targeted from that standpoint.
It really is. It makes total sense. Now, do you have any numbers? Like, do you get a certain amount of calls per month out of a certain amount of commercials? Do you know what the numbers fall down at, or does it vary from place to place?
Yeah, we track everything. So again, call volume, cost per lead, cost per acquisition. Again, as we help students all across the country set this up, those are going to go up and down. But here's the number that comes out the back end that creates what I would call a way to line everybody up and compare it. And that's what we call your dollar per dollar return. Mm-hmm. So for every dollar you spend in marketing, how many dollars are you getting back in return? So the way it works with radio is we see on average a $3 to $4 return. So for every dollar, we're fundamentally tripling to quadrupling our investment on radio.
That's tremendous.
So that's consistent. So like in Dallas, for me, year after year, we hit right at $3.50. And here's the thing I like about, I don't know if you've experienced this, things like direct mail, things like that. I have years and months where they tend to be a little bit more of a roller coaster ride, depending on competition, saturation, what's happening. Radio's just been a very dependable and consistent $3 to $4 return. And for those listening that might be a little bit more advanced, if you have an operations and payroll in which you're responsible for, the last thing you want is a marketing channel that fluctuates a lot. You just get payroll every month. So the thing I like about radio is I can just rely on the consistency of it. It's consistent call volume for me, and it's a consistent dollar per dollar return for us as well.
So, and basically, you probably got somebody, whether it's yourself initially, if you're a newer investor, right, who's answering the phone calls, or you can set up and have a call center do it, more or less, right?
So I do not recommend a call center. It's a great question. Yeah. And I do not recommend sending these to voicemail like you would on direct mail. These are calls that you must answer. Right? Yeah. Because you're laughing, I have this like fly rolling around me. So you like see, what's this guy doing? What's wrong with him? This fly is just like,
I saw it, don't worry.
I think I just saw that on the election debate, right?
I saw it though on Pence, right?
I feel like I'm having the same experience right now. So anyway, so these call volume coming in are very quality. So you want to answer them live. But here's what's super cool about radio. We put a distinct phone number on each radio station that we advertise on. So you just program your phone. So when your phone rings, you know what radio station that it's coming from. But here's the coolest thing about radio. They send you what's called a pre-log the day before. So you actually know when your spots are going to run, and the call volume comes in almost at time. Really closely. Yeah. So for instance, if you're listening, you're working like a 9 to 5, or you're juggling some vocation and trying to make the jump to real estate, and you've got to be really balanced and protective of your time. Radio is so easy to manage, right? The best way I like to describe radio, Paul, is it's set it and forget it. Yeah. So if you want to pick on direct mail again. Direct mail, you're constantly tinkering with the postcard, you're tinkering with the message. Let's get into list building. Everyone is trying to fight over who can build the actual best list, right? So list stacking. You got to deal with the mail company and the mail drops and everything that has to do with that. The great thing about radio is the radio station does everything for you. So you only have two responsibilities: pay your monthly bill and answer the phone when it rings. Other than that, it is the lowest maintenance marketing channel I know. And I had one student tell me, you know how I feel when I go in and I take programs and I launch new marketing programs, I feel like I'm just launching an entirely new job for myself. And that's how something like direct mail feels, or text blasting. They require this long, ongoing, high maintenance to keep them managed. Once you lock in radio, literally all you got to do is answer the phone when it rings. It's that small of a maintenance piece, which I live in Tulum, Mexico. I'm a lifestyle guy. I don't want something eating up a lot of my time because of the management side of it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I just thought of another piece. There's two questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask you the first one, and we'll go to the second one in a little bit. The first piece, with direct mail, generally it takes 4 hits for you to hit a customer before they'll contact you, right? Because all right, I see this name over and over. Chris keeps sending me this postcard. All right, maybe I'll give him a call. It seems legit. Whereas I think radio, you can get people on that initial first hit much more so than you're going to on that. Have you seen that? Is instead of a 3 or 4 month buildup like you have with direct mail, you're getting there much quicker, right?
Yeah. So I find from any time I launch a station or our students do, on average, they're executing contracts within the first 4 to 8 weeks.
Huge. Yeah.
Which is huge. Here's the reason why. And I want you to kind of, if you're listening, think about this. Where do you begin with the seller when you begin with the spam approach? Text blast, RVMing, whatever. You already said it earlier, Paul. Oh, I've heard from this guy 4 times or this woman 4 times. They must be somewhat credible. I think they'll call. But just understand that they're calling you under suspicion, right? With radio, it's not that case. You are perceived as sophisticated. You're perceived as professional. And so when they call you, you're beginning way much further down the road of know you, like you, trust you. Right? So I hear my students say, wow, they're just such easier conversions because I'm starting in a much different place of trust than I am with the spam-based approaches that I've been doing before, which I think is critical for sure.
No, that makes total sense. Absolutely makes total sense. Now, next question is timeframes, right? Obviously, there's going to be good timeframes for you to advertise on the radio. I would think something like this, your morning drive into work, your lunch hour, and then your evening commute back home. Am I right with that or am I wrong?
The difficult thing with radio, Paul, is always figuring out all of the variables to line up. Do I run a 30-second spot or a 60-second spot? Do I advertise weekdays or weekends, right? Yeah. Advertise during the day, or it just goes on and on. Do I put a phone number and a URL on there or just a phone number? So fundamentally what we're doing is just laying out all the variables that we split tested over time. And so the variable you just touched on is really important. We advertise Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we advertise during prime time. And so that's when people are in morning commute, lunch commute, and coming home from work. And so that's when we find that we're capturing the people that we're looking for sure.
And that makes total sense. And obviously it's key. The phone number is the big thing, right? The URL is going to be an action later because you're driving. You're not going to be looking up the URL and at the website to try to find that. So by giving the phone number out, you're going to get the quickest response from people. Now, have you had a better response one way or the other? What are the percentages giving you a phone call as compared to contacting you through the web?
We don't give a URL. That's another.
Okay, so you don't. So it doesn't pay to do that.
Motivated people. You do not send a motivated seller to a website to fill out a form in which you got to chase them back down.
Makes sense. Yeah.
You catch them in the emotion, in the circumstance that got them to pick up that phone while driving and dial you. So we run everything through the phone and we capture those calls live.
That is awesome. And next question I have for you, because I buy in a lot of rural areas, right? So you're going to have a much smaller population. How many of your students do that, advertise in more rural areas? And are they still getting, I imagine they're still getting very good responses, but do you see numbers differentiate much?
Now, when you say rural areas, you're talking about smaller markets in general?
Smaller markets, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, you have to understand the bandwidth of radio. I advertise in Dallas. I'm heard all the way up to Oklahoma, south, all the way to Temple Belton, Texas, which is where my dad lives, which is like 2.5 hours south of me. You are covering some big landscape.
It's a monster market, that Dallas market is, for sure.
Yeah. And so a lot of the markets, you're getting big stations. But the other important thing is just remember to tag onto this. You're not list dependent. RVM, text blasting, cold calling, where everyone is competing over the same list. We are advertising and hitting people that are not getting an RVM message. So what I'll tell you is most of the time, myself and my students have no competition when it comes to these. Can you imagine that? You have authority and you're walking in as the only one, which is super cool. Now, when it comes to rural areas, there's 3 types of markets that exist in the US. We divide them into small markets, mid-sized markets, and large markets, right? So DFW is a large market. Small markets, they're all kind of what I call winners, but they're winners for different reasons. The value of being in a small market is that your cost of radio is going to be so low. So I'll give you an example. I have a guy in Multipliers, Mitch Caluzzi. I was just hanging out with him in San Antonio. I helped him set up his radio. He's getting roughly around 30 calls per week, executing several deals. I mean, just crushing it. He is on 11 stations
Wow.
And the cost to advertise on 11 stations in his area is under $3,000.
$3,000 per month is wow.
Per month. So it's so what he'll tell you is like, I am dominating my city. They can't turn on, I think there's only 2 stations he's not advertising on his entire market.
Awesome.
So the cool thing about that is the authority that he's so rapidly building, in which everyone in that city knows who he is. Now, for me in Dallas, I got to work a lot harder and spend a lot more money because there's more stations and we have millions of people. So when people say, does it work in a rural area? Absolutely. The only flip side is you won't be able to scale it as much as I'm going to be able to. Yeah. Dallas. But the deal is in Dallas, I'll never get the ROI that someone like Mitch Galuzzi is going to get, because again, he closes one deal, or I'd say let's say his average deal is what, like 15,000, right? He closes, 2.5 deals per year. He's paid for his radio marketing
the whole year. Yeah.
And this guy is picking up and executing, closing multiple deals per month. So a guy like that is going to see an ROI that's just out of control. But again, I always tell people expect 3 to 4, but we have students in small markets that get above that for sure.
I love it. I mean, the cost per lead, like you're saying, in these small markets is just going to be so low. I mean, in comparison to the bigger markets, obviously, and you're going to have even less competition in the smaller markets too, as benefit.
Like double moat.
Totally. Now, next question is, I'm assuming you do some, I don't know, you do AM dial type stuff. A lot of people 50 plus, right? They're listening to either talk radio, or they're listening to, like, we got local KYW news, a news station where, get traffic updates, all that kind of stuff. Are you hitting those type of things? Or are you mixing it? You're doing FM, you're kind of doing everything.
Great question. So if you're advertising on radio, we always recommend for you to start on music versus talk. The reason is that people who listen to talk radio tend to be more affluent by nature. And the more affluent your audience, the less likely they're going to have a circumstance that requires them to sell at a discount. So what we always tell our students is, begin on the music, and then over time you can layer in the talk radio. It works. It's just secondary to the actual music stations.
And that makes total sense. There's so much great information we're getting from this. I can't tell people enough. Like, this is such a great marketing method that nobody else is teaching out there, that nobody else knows about. I mean, it's tremendous. Tell me some other things I'm not even asking about, right? I'm sure you've got other things that you want to hit on there that I'm not even asking you questions on. Anything specific that I'm missing in there?
I think a couple. I think a lot of people listening right now are probably burnt out on the outbound side of prospecting. There's 2 ways in which you market. You either spend time or you spend money, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're new, you probably don't have any money. And so you're going to do things like cold calling and text blasting. That's what a lot of people do. But as soon as you can make that transition over to starting to have a small budget, even if it's like $1,000 to $2,000 a month, the great thing about radio is it's inbound. You do not have to smile and dial. You do not have to sit down and turn on, the auto dialer and, make X amount, 100 of contacts per day. Does cold calling work? Yes. But let's just say it's not easy to do. I would much rather pay and just wait for my phone to ring and answer it. So the thing about radio is that it's 100% inbound. And by comparison to outbound, my students are just like, are you kidding me? Like, I want all of my marketing to be this simple by comparison. So I think that that's really important as well. So that's a key thing. And then, the other thing about radio is, we're very protective of making sure that it doesn't get oversaturated. So with people that we work with, we actually provide exclusivity within markets around the country. So, if someone joins on and goes, Chris, I don't want to try to figure all this out myself. Let me just come in. I'm going to pay for speed. Help me set this thing up. They know that, based on the size of the market, we'll never have more than 1 person in a small market to 3 people in a large market. So that's the other thing. We're going to preserve radio. We've definitely worked really diligently to do that around the country.
That's huge. And now I'm assuming you could probably set people up. You may do this, right? You may already be doing this. So let's say somebody like me, and I invest all over the country, right? And I already know, say, Casper, Wyoming, where I was just at last week, and say I want to turn on the radio for Casper, Wyoming. Do you show us how to do that? Because it's the same thing. I'm just not going to be face-to-face meeting the person, right? Same deal, right?
So we have students that are definitely on the virtual wholesaling side. And again, how are you going to go into another market, right? Most people will go into another market via direct mail, text blasting, cold calling, or RVMing, right? That's a lot. Doing what you do actually is super unique, Paul. We were talking about that when it comes to the auction piece, right?
Right.
In my personal opinion, going into another market on radio is one of the best ways to do virtual wholesaling.
Yeah.
Again, you're talking about a small cost out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in and you're able to get data back very quickly, because it's not like cold calling where you got to call for 6 months before you start seeing returns. You're going to be able within a 90-day period to get a really good sense for it. And I'm telling you, I'm not doing virtual wholesaling all over the country, but I have students that have landed in these little niche markets. And I mean, they're just crushing it.
Yeah.
Nobody there. I'm like, wow, what would it be like to have radio in that area? So, if you're listening, you're like, I'm a virtual wholesaler. What I would definitely have you think about is potentially utilizing radio to grow your virtual wholesaling company. And the great thing is, if you want to go into a busier area, for instance, I'm in Dallas, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to do deals in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. Hot market.
Houston, San Antonio. I was just talking to a buddy of mine from San Antonio about that recently. And the good thing is you can go into a competitive market and still be doing something that nobody else is doing in that market and capitalizing on an area, like in Texas or wherever else that people really want to be as valuable.
You're really getting me thinking here and stuff, because I'm operating in different markets already virtually with the auction side here. And I've got boots on the ground in San Antonio, in Casper, Wyoming, in Tucson, Arizona, and the Carolinas. So I'm starting to think maybe I should utilize radio as a part of my business here to bring in a whole other different avenue, right? I mean, it's just tremendous. It's really, you're opening up my brain here, Chris. I'm going to be reaching out to you for some coaching here, brother. No, I love it. I mean, this is it's not even that outside the box thinking. You've been doing it for a very long time, and people used to do it and they just think it's super, super expensive, but it is outside the box in the way we operate in this world today, because everybody's so tech heavy. Everybody's thinking I need to do PPC or I need to do text messaging. And God, these are super expensive, right? And then the audience that you're hitting with a PPC and a text, you're hitting the millennials, you're hitting younger people. Not a whole lot of them own houses. So, I mean, I think your marketing is the best out there when it comes down to it because of the target audience that you're hitting, besides direct mail lists, right? Where you're hitting directly to people you want to. I think this is the second best method, if not the best method. Am I wrong?
Right. No, you are. You're getting right in front of the people that are going to sell you your properties. And the thing that's so comical about radio is it's just been sitting under everyone's nose.
Yeah.
I've stayed quiet for 10 years, Paul, right? I have not. This was kind of like a tool in my tool belt. And people always ask me, well, why are you talking about it now, right? And that's just because I live in Mexico now. I don't have a desire to wholesale all over the country. I got my nice little North Texas spot. That's plenty of deals for us to do per year. And I have launched other companies in which I'm even more passionate about. So if you learn to do it up in Wyoming or out in Miami or San Francisco, what do I care? So that's the year is this year's that we've opened it up and started to teach it. And man, what a great year for radio because of COVID. I mean, we didn't touch on that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, we're buying at a super discounted rate. I mean, what we're teaching students is our formula for how to calculate how much you need to advertise on a radio station. Because the worst thing you can do, which everyone does, is call a station and ask to speak to the rep and look at their media packet. It is about the same as calling a real estate agent and asking them to put you in front of an investment deal. They don't know how. The real estate agents, they sell retail. It's the same with reps. So we teach people how to do that. But this year has been fascinating. I've never seen this. I'm not saying this is for every student. Every student has a different experience. But in my 10 years, I've never seen one call closes on radio until this year. I have students that will come in, throw that number down, which is 25 to 50% below what everyone else is paying, and they'll go, done, let's do the deal. Mm-hmm. And that is because of COVID this year. You had a mass exodus of people advertising on radio, particularly people that were not doing direct call to actions, but were simply doing it just to create awareness around a brand. If you were using radio for brand awareness, you probably dropped it, right? Because you had to focus on lead gen. So I think this has been an incredible year for radio. In my 10 years, I've never seen a more negotiable year. And how long that window is going to stay open, I don't know. But right now it's still open.
That's tremendous. That's something that people really need to get into. For our audience here that's doing the virtual stuff, think about what areas you want to invest in and maybe think about areas that there's not a whole lot of other investors in and reach out to Chris and his group. And a little bit, I'm going to ask him about how to get in touch with him so he can give you all that information if you are interested in his coaching program, which to me would be tremendous here. But no, if you're looking at different markets, there's no better way to do it here and quicker, right? You're going to get in right away. You're creating a commercial, you're putting it on there, and then within 30 to 60 days, you could potentially have a deal, which is just tremendous. So you're going to get your return. Basically, your first deal should pay for your advertising for a little while, which is great.
They're bigger, profitable deals because you're not having to drop your price based on competition. So the biggest deals we do we do direct mail, we do pay-per-click, we do all that stuff. And for sure, I'm a guy that tracks everything. Our profit per deal is higher on radio than anything else we do. Yeah. And that's because we don't have any competition. So the seller can't comparison shop us.
That is awesome. So Chris, if people want to get into your coaching program with what you show them how to do radio, I know you show them how to do other things as well. What's the best way for them to reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, again, I always tell people, if you're listening, this is either really going to resonate with you or it's not. But the people that come in are like, oh my gosh, like the dots are just connecting. It's like, how did I miss this? Everyone kind of has that same type of epiphany around it. But I always tell people, start with questions and simply book a call, see if your market's open and make sure it's a good fit for you. But go to wholesalinginc.com/REI Radio. Again, that's wholesalinginc.com/REI Radio and book a call.
Awesome. That is tremendous. I want to talk about some of your other endeavors. I know you're doing some other different things. And is there anything else you want to share? Any endeavors you're looking to do? You do some not-for-profit stuff potentially. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about with that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would touch on, again, people always ask me, well, Chris, if radio is not your first passion, what is your passion? And I think more importantly, it's the message behind what we're doing. If you're listening now, the thing I've learned being in this game for 15 years is, entrepreneurs tend to isolate, particularly when things get hard. And, statistically, we understand that 1 out of 3 leaders will actually finish the race. That means that 2/3 will fail to finish the leadership race. Either they will get disqualified because of a moral misstep or they will burn themselves out. And when a leader falls, particularly an influencer like in the real estate industry, or if you're listening, you might know that person that you really looked up to and made that mistake and literally toppled their empire. It's a blow. It's a blow to those of us that look up to that person. So I run Multipliers Brotherhood, which focuses on legacy fulfillment. I am key in that word brotherhood, not mastermind, because most men, and again, my group serves men, and that's just who we focused on. Most men have never actually experienced brotherhood. If you look at statistics on asking men, name the number of men in your life that if the shit hit the fan, you could confide in, it's a big whopping 0 over 80% of the time. That's dangerous for leaders to function. So really, if you ask me what my passion is, it's about changing the statistic of the amount of leaders that are not finishing well and helping more of us as leaders who are called to influence, to utilize businesses as we were talking earlier, as a vehicle or a delivery system to impact the world. If you have that mission, that's great. Just understand that you can't get to clarity alone. You will not, scale to the top of Everest by yourself. You're foolish to think that you can do it. And so I'm all about brotherhood and community. Again, as they say, iron sharpens iron, right? It's just extremely important. And that's my passion.
That is, man. That really hits home too, because you're so right. There's so many people, like we're all entrepreneurs, right? And when we do tend to stay at home and stay by ourselves, and when something goes bad, we're not really telling people too much about that. We're fine when things are going well, but when things go bad, it kind of gets dark, and you need that brother to reach out to who can help bring you back up or maybe point you in the right direction. That's so important. So freaking important.
Is it comes out sideways. And so this is why you see so much alcohol and drug abuse, why you see extramarital affairs and porn. And, guys are looking for something as a Band-Aid to put over what they're feeling as they're off in a corner by themselves dealing with the weight of being a business owner, which in my opinion is one of the heaviest weights to carry, because you are responsible not just for you and your family, but every person that works for you, every family member that they support, right? And everyone that has eyes on you that are looking to you for guidance and wisdom, as you grow your real estate business. And so the problem is isolation leads to sideways behavior, and that sideways behavior leads to disqualification from leadership. And man, it's devastating to watch a leader fall. I think that's one of the hardest things to watch, is to watch someone blow up their life.
It really is. And I've seen it happen to people. Unfortunately, it is tough. And it goes back to that Spider-Man line, with great power comes great responsibility. And when you're a business leader and you're responsible for, you really look at it, all the people that work for you, you look like you're responsible for them and their families and taking care of them. So it's not just the stress of ourselves that we're looking at. I talk a lot of guys in the mastermind. It's like, it's all my employees. When COVID hit, they were stressing, right? Everybody in this industry and every industry was stressing. What am I going to do? Do I lay people off? Or I don't want to lay people off. And then the PPP thing came in and helped people out there a bit. But man, that is stressful stuff. So when a market tanks, and it's going to tank here at some point or another, it's going to add more stress. And we'll see people need this brotherhood. This brotherhood thing will be very, very, very important to people. That's awesome. It's a great cause, man. I appreciate you sharing too. That is big. Man, I really appreciate it. So if people, and actually, I think you already gave us that, the Multiples Brotherhood, if anybody's interested and wants to join that group, and that's big. That's big. Really appreciate that.
Again, if you're listening, it's a minimum of $1 million a year in revenue to qualify.
Right.
And again, I just chosen to serve kind of the top of the game. So we serve really kind of the top 5 to 10% of the real estate investors out there. And again, if you're listening and you don't qualify for mine, find another one. There's people that serve all different levels of audience for different reasons as well. And of course, too, if you're listening like, man, I'd like to also learn a little bit more about what other Chris is doing. Again, you can always go to my YouTube and subscribe there. Again, free information, right? So go to Chris Arnold Real Estate on YouTube and you subscribe and follow and just kind of keep up with what the heck I'm doing down here in Mexico all the time. So
that's awesome. I love it. I'm going to be subscribing to your channel for sure there. Yeah, I'm doing a ton on YouTube too. I love YouTube, but man, there's almost too much information on YouTube when you think about it, right? There's too much, which is awesome, man. I really appreciate you sharing the whole radio thing here. This is big. This will be big to our audience here. I'm sure you're going to have people reaching out to you, and I really hope that they do. And for people looking to grow their business beyond just what we do with the bank owned and the auctions, get into this, right? This radio is going to definitely be something you can add more additional properties to each month. Thanks again, Chris. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be interviewing you within the next year or so here.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for having me.